Your instinct is to run from pain, but what if your escape is the source of your deepest suffering? This is the paradox at the heart of a radical ancient idea, Amor Fati, the love of one's fate. Our entire lives are spent in a negotiation with hardship, trying to minimize it, outsmart it, or simply endure it. But what if there was a way to not just accept the difficult chapters of your story, but to genuinely love them? This is not about seeking out pain or glorifying struggle. It is about a profound psychological shift that can transform your relationship with every obstacle, loss, and setback you will ever face. By the end of this exploration, you will have a practical framework for turning life's inevitable hardships into a source of unshakable strength and meaning. We will trace this of a Roman emperor to the fiery declarations of a modern philosopher, and finally into the science of how your brain can rewrite the story of your own suffering. What is the one difficult experience in your past that you secretly wish had never happened? The phrase itself is a key to the entire concept, Amor Fati. It comes from two simple Latin words, amor meaning love, a deep and active affection, and fati meaning of fate, of what is given, of what has happened and what will happen. So it translates directly to the love of one's fate. But this is not a passive, resigned sigh. This is an active, wholehearted embrace. To understand its power, we need to visit two very different minds who shaped it. The first is the Stoic emperor Marcus Aurelius, who ruled Rome nearly 2,000 years ago. In his private journal, known today as Meditations, he did not write Amor Fati directly, but he poured the sentiment onto every page. He constantly reminded himself to accept without complaint the events the universe delivered. For him, every obstacle, every difficult person, every moment of frustration was not an interruption to his life, but the very material of it. His philosophy was one of clear-eyed acceptance, seeing the world as it is and choosing a virtuous response. This is the sturdy foundation, but the idea was taken to a breathtaking new height centuries later by the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche looked at this Stoic acceptance and asked a more radical question. What if we did not just accept our fate, but actually loved it? What if we could look back on our entire life, with all its joys and all its sorrows, and say not just I endured it, but I would want it no other way? He framed this as the ultimate test for how one lives. My formula for greatness in a human being, he wrote, is Amor Fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. This is the leap from tolerance to affirmation, from bearing your cross to seeing it as the very thing that gives you strength. The Stoic says this happened, and I will find a way to be good within it. Nietzsche asks, what if this happened for me, to forge me into who I am meant to become? One built a fortress of the mind to withstand life's storms. The other sought to dance in the rain. Together, they give us the full picture of this profound idea, setting the stage for what it truly means to love your own suffering. This is the line that separates a quiet endurance from a transformative love. To merely accept your fate is to stand still in a downpour, head bowed, waiting for it to be over. You tolerate the storm. Amor Fati asks you to lift your face and feel the rain. It invites you to notice how the air smells cleaner, how the world looks washed and renewed, and to recognize that this very storm is what will make the next stretch of sunshine feel so deeply earned. Acceptance is passive. It says, this is happening to me and I will not fight it. Love is active. It says, this is happening for me and I will find a way to let it shape me for the better. The critical distinction lies in the posture of your mind. One is a shield, a defensive stance against life's arrows. The other is a forge, a creative fire that uses those same arrows as fuel to temper your character. Think of a difficult chapter in your own life, a period of loss or failure you have simply accepted and moved past. Now imagine looking back at that same chapter, not with relief that it's over, but with a genuine gratitude for what it carved into you. That shift from seeing hardship as an enemy to be survived to seeing it as a teacher that arrived precisely on time is the radical heart of this philosophy. It moves you from resignation to authorship. You are no longer a character passively enduring the plot twists of your story. You become the writer who understands that conflict is what makes a hero. Without this distinction, Amor Fati is just a fancy phrase for Stoicism. With it, it becomes a revolutionary way to live. The true power of this philosophy rests on a single, liberating distinction. Nearly every ounce of unnecessary pain we experience begins when we confuse what we can change with what we cannot. This is the core of Stoic wisdom, articulated most clearly by the former slave-turned-teacher, Epictetus. He called it the dichotomy of control. He said, "Some things are within our power while others are not. Within our power are our own opinions, our impulses, our desires, and our aversions. Everything outside our own mind, the health of our body, our reputation, our wealth, these are not entirely within our power." This sounds simple, almost obvious, but its application is revolutionary. Think of a common source of distress like a harsh criticism from someone you respect. The event itself, the words they spoke, is outside your control. It has already happened. What is within your control is your judgment of those words. Do you interpret them as a personal attack, fueling days of resentment? Or do you see them as information, perhaps poorly delivered, that you can sift through for any useful grain of truth? The initial sting is natural, but the prolonged suffering is a choice you make in how you relate to that sting. Amor Fati is the ultimate expression of applying your energy and love precisely where you have agency. It is not about loving the external event of a loss or an illness. It is about wholeheartedly loving your own response to it. It means directing your affection toward the strength you discover, the patience you cultivate, the perspective you gain. When you truly internalize this dichotomy, your relationship with fate transforms. You stop wasting love and energy begging the universe to rewrite a chapter it has already published. Instead, you pour all of that love into the one thing you can author, your own character in the face of that chapter. The storm is not in your control. But learning to find a strange beauty in the sound of the rain, that is yours entirely. Nietzsche took this idea to its most extreme and illuminating edge with a single, haunting question. He called it the Eternal Recurrence. Imagine for a moment that a demon whispered to you in your loneliest hour that you must live this life of yours over again and again and again. Not a similar life, but this exact one, with every joy, every mistake, every moment of hardship, repeated in infinite, identical cycles. What would you do? Would you gnash your teeth and curse the demon, or would you fall to your knees in gratitude? This is not a theory about the cosmos. It is the ultimate philosophical litmus test for how you truly feel about your own existence. The question it asks is brutally simple. Could you love your life, every single part of it, enough to will its endless return? This is where Amor Fati shifts from a comforting philosophy to a profound challenge. It reframes the love of fate not as passive acceptance, but as the highest possible form of affirmation. To look at the totality of your story, the chapters of loss and the moments of regret you wish you could edit out, and to say with your whole being, "Yes, I would choose this again." That is the sound of a soul fully embracing its own destiny. It transforms your relationship with past suffering from something you survived to something that was essential. That difficult period, that painful ending, that seemingly senseless hardship, it is no longer a scar to hide. Under the light of this thought experiment, it becomes a necessary thread in a tapestry you would weave an infinite number of times. The test reveals a quiet truth. We often spend our lives wishing parts of ourselves away, editing our past to make it more palatable. The Eternal Recurrence asks you to put down the editor's pen and become the proud author of the entire, unedited manuscript. It asks, if this is the one life you get to live forever, How does that change the weight you give to today's struggle? The demon's question reveals a quiet battle we fight every single day. It is a war against reality itself, and our default weapon is resistance. We are wired for it. Our minds possess a powerful negativity bias, an ancient survival mechanism that scans the horizon for threats and clings to them long after they have passed. This is why a single critical comment can drown out 100 compliments, and why a moment of failure can overshadow years of success. Our psychology is not designed for contentment, it is designed for vigilance. This bias makes the practice of Amor Fati feel deeply unnatural at first, because it asks us to turn our attention toward the very things our brains are screaming at us to avoid. We do not just notice hardship, we instinctively fight it. We argue with it in our heads, replaying scenarios and wishing for different outcomes. We tell ourselves stories about how unfair it is, how we are the victim of circumstance, and how life should be different. This narrative of victimhood, while sometimes rooted in genuine pain, becomes a cage of our own making. It keeps us focused on what we have lost, rather than on what we still have the power to build. This internal struggle, this refusal to accept what is already true, creates a second layer of pain that the psychologist Carl Jung called neurotic suffering. The first pain is the event itself, the loss, the disappointment, the diagnosis. That is life happening. The second pain is everything we add on top, the rumination, the resentment, the endless question of why me. This secondary suffering is entirely optional, a story we choose to tell ourselves about the first story. It is the difference between feeling the sharp sting of a cold wind and then spending the next hour angrily narrating to yourself how much you hate the cold, how it ruined your day, and how it should be summer instead. The wind is just wind, the misery is your creation. Amor Fati is not about denying the initial chill. It is about stopping the exhausting, self-defeating commentary that follows. It aims to solve the problem of this added anguish, to quiet the war inside so you can face the weather outside with clear eyes and a steady heart. The war inside your mind is fought with the stories you tell. This is where the philosophy of Amor Fati becomes a practical, daily skill through a process called cognitive reframing. To love your fate is not a magical feeling that descends upon you. It is a conscious choice to change the narrative you assign to a difficult event. Reframing is the active engine that makes this possible. It is the deliberate act of looking at the same set of facts and choosing to interpret them through a lens of meaning rather than a lens of victimhood. Think of it as editing the internal subtitle track that runs alongside your life. The events themselves are the film already shot and in the can, but the narration, the meaning, the story of what it all signifies, that is yours to write. Take a foundational example, a professional failure. The raw facts are clear. You pursued a goal and you did not achieve it. The default, pain-inducing frame is to see this as a condemnation of your ability, a public proof of your inadequacy. This story leads to shame, withdrawal, and a fear of trying again. The reframe, the act of Amor Fati, is to consciously shift that narrative. You look at the same outcome and say, "This was not a verdict on my worth, it was a necessary lesson." It redirected my energy away from a path that was not aligned with my deeper strengths and toward a better opportunity I had not yet seen. The failure becomes the essential data point that course-corrected your entire journey. This is not positive thinking or naive optimism. It is a rigorous search for utility and truth within the hardship. You are not denying the disappointment. You are simply refusing to let that disappointment have the final, defining word on what the event meant for your life. The event itself is outside your control. The story you build around it, that is your sovereign territory. To love your fate is to become the author of that story, sentence by deliberate sentence. This reframing is the quiet alchemy that has fueled some of history's most resilient spirits. To see it in action, we must look to those who faced circumstances that defy easy comprehension. Viktor Frankl, an Austrian psychiatrist, endured years in the Nazi concentration camp system, a place designed to strip away every shred of human dignity. What he observed there and within himself became the foundation for his life's work. He noted that while the guards could control his body, his environment, and his physical fate, they could not control his mind's final freedom, the freedom to choose his attitude in any given set of circumstances. In the midst of unimaginable hardship, he practiced a profound form of Amor Fati. He did not love the horror, but he chose to love the meaning he could forge in response to it. He imagined himself after the war giving a lecture on the psychology of the camp, turning his present suffering into future purpose. This was not denial, it was the ultimate act of cognitive reframing, transforming poison into medicine. His experience led him to develop logotherapy, the idea that our primary drive is not pleasure, but the discovery of meaning, even and especially in suffering. Frankl's story is a powerful testament, and modern psychology has given a name to this phenomenon: post-traumatic growth. Research suggests that after a period of significant struggle, many individuals do not just return to a baseline level of functioning. Instead, they report positive psychological change. They speak of a renewed appreciation for life, deeper personal relationships, a recognition of new possibilities, and a sense of personal strength they never knew they possessed. This is the documented scientific echo of the philosophical idea. The trauma itself is not loved, but the person who emerges from it can learn to love the stronger, more compassionate, and more purposeful self that the hardship revealed. Think of an artist who channels profound grief into a masterpiece that speaks to millions, or an advocate who, after a personal loss, dedicates their life to preventing that same loss for others. They have taken the raw, painful material of their fate and, through the reframing of Amor Fati, sculpted it into a legacy. This process shows us that the love of fate is not about a blissful state of constant positivity. It is about the solemn, powerful decision to use every experience, especially the most difficult ones, as the fuel for a more meaningful life. The wound becomes the very place where new understanding enters the world. But Frankl's growth and the artist's masterpiece can feel distant, like monuments to a resilience we are not sure we possess. The true test of this philosophy is not in the grand tragedies, but in the small, daily abrasions that wear down our spirit. This is where Amor Fati becomes a practice, not just a principle. It lives in the moment your computer freezes before a deadline, in the flat tone of a dismissive text message, in the rain that starts the moment you leave without an umbrella. Your instinctive reaction in these moments is a microcosm of your relationship with fate itself. Do you clench against the reality, or do you find a way to open your hand to it? The practice begins with a simple, three-step mental protocol you can apply before the frustration even settles in. First, acknowledge the initial resistance. Notice the flash of heat in your chest, the mental curse, the immediate story of inconvenience your mind begins to spin. Do not judge it, just see it. This is your ancient wiring reacting to a thwarted plan. Second, consciously state to yourself, "This is my fate in this moment." This phrase is a circuit breaker. It does not mean you wanted the traffic jam or the criticism. It simply acknowledges that this, right now, is the reality of the situation you are in. You are naming the weather instead of arguing with it. Third, and this is the active work of love, actively look for a hidden benefit or a chance to practice a neglected virtue. Stuck in traffic, this is your fate for the next 20 minutes. The hidden benefit is an unexpected pocket of time, a forced pause in a hectic day. It is a chance to practice patience, to listen to an album you love all the way through, to simply be with your own thoughts without an agenda. A project gets cancelled, this is your fate. The hidden benefit is reclaimed time and energy. It is a chance to practice adaptability, to redirect your efforts towards something you had sidelined, to discover that a closed door often makes the adjacent window more visible. This practice transforms minor irritations from thieves of your peace into gardeners of your character. Each small acceptance is a repetition, a strengthening of the neural pathway that chooses response over reaction. You are not waiting for a catastrophe to practice loving your fate. You are training for it in the shallow end, with the daily disappointments that life provides in ample supply. What minor friction today could become your first deliberate act of Amor Fati? Training in the shallow end prepares you for the deeper waters, but how do you build the strength to swim when the current turns against you? This is where a seemingly contradictory Stoic practice becomes essential, the deliberate choice of voluntary discomfort. Think of the modern interpretations, taking a cold shower when a warm one is available, skipping a meal to understand hunger, or pushing through the final, burning repetition in a workout. On the surface, these actions can appear masochistic, a pointless infliction of pain on an otherwise comfortable life, but that is a fundamental misunderstanding of their purpose. They are not acts of self-punishment, they are psychological rehearsals. Every time you willingly step into a cold shower, you are not just shocking your body. You are having a quiet, powerful conversation with your own resistance. You are telling your instinct for immediate comfort, not right now. You are practicing the act of embracing a sensation you did not choose, in a context you completely control. This controlled environment is the gym for your mind. You are building a specific muscle, the muscle of equanimity, the ability to remain calm and centered in the face of life's inevitable unpleasantness. When you voluntarily fast for a day, you are not just giving your digestive system a rest. You are becoming intimately familiar with the gnawing feeling of hunger, observing it without panic, and learning that you can function, even think clearly, alongside that discomfort. You are demystifying it. This familiarity is the antidote to fear. Most of our suffering around involuntary hardship is amplified by a terror of the unknown. We do not just fear the pain of a loss, we fear our imagined inability to handle it. Voluntary discomfort removes that unknown. It provides direct, lived evidence that you can tolerate difficulty, that you can observe discomfort without being consumed by it. When fate later delivers an involuntary hardship, a financial setback, or a personal rejection, the emotional texture is not entirely foreign. You have already, in a small, safe way, practiced the posture of acceptance. You have already rehearsed the act of loving your fate within a laboratory you created. The cold shower was not about the water temperature. It was a dress rehearsal for the day you receive bad news, and instead of collapsing, you feel the chill run through you, and then, from a place of practiced strength, you begin to consider your next move. The voluntary hardship builds the resilience so that when the involuntary hardship arrives, your first response is not blind fear, but a remembered strength, and perhaps in time, the beginnings of a deeper love for what that new challenge might forge in you. The deepest test of this philosophy arrives not with inconvenience but with loss. When someone we love is no longer there, or a chapter of life we cherished comes to a close, the idea of loving that fate can feel impossible, even offensive. It is crucial to understand what Amor Fati is not in this context. It is not about feeling glad for the loss itself. It is not about pretending the grief is not real or that the emptiness is welcome. That would be a betrayal of love, not an expression of it. The love is directed elsewhere. First, it is a love for the life that contained that profound connection. Amor Fati in grief means holding the entirety of the story, not just the final page. It is the active choice to feel gratitude for the privilege of having loved so deeply that the absence now aches. You are not loving the hole in your life, you are loving the shape of what once filled it, and honoring that the shape remains because the love was real. Second, and this is the harder, transformative part, it is about learning to love the person you are now forced to become. A profound loss shatters the version of you that existed within that relationship or that life chapter. The person you were cannot continue, and the rebuilding is agonizing. Amor Fati asks you to extend compassion and eventually a quiet respect to this new self taking shape in the aftermath. This self carries a deeper understanding of fragility, a greater capacity for empathy, and a clearer vision of what truly matters. It means looking at your own resilience, forged in a fire you never asked for, and recognizing its worth. This is the integration, weaving the loss into your ongoing story without letting it define you through bitterness. Bitterness is a story that says this loss ruined me. Integration is a story that says this loss changed me, and within that change I can find new forms of strength and meaning. It is the difference between a memorial that is a sealed tomb and one that becomes a garden where new things can grow, nourished by the memory of what was. The love is for the garden, for the continued act of living a life that honors the love that came before. It is not a quick fix for pain, but a long-term direction for healing, a North Star that guides you toward wholeness rather than away from the past. Perhaps the ultimate crucible for this philosophy is the relentless presence of chronic pain or illness. Here, the suffering is not a single event to be reframed, but a constant companion, a landscape you must learn to inhabit. The instinctive posture is one of total war, a daily, exhausting battle against your own body. This fight, while understandable, often becomes a second illness, a consuming resentment that leaves little energy for anything else. Amor Fati, in this profound context, does not ask you to love the pain. It invites a more subtle, yet more liberating shift. It asks you to redirect your love from a futile battle against the pain itself to a deep affirmation of the life that persists within its constraints. This means ceasing to see your entire existence through the narrow lens of the discomfort. Instead, you begin to notice with heightened clarity everything that is not pain. The warmth of sunlight on your skin on a manageable day, the genuine laughter shared with a friend, the quiet satisfaction of completing a small, adapted task. These moments are not diminished by the pain, they are often felt more intensely because of the contrast they provide. The practice becomes one of meticulous attention, hunting for pockets of beauty and meaning within the narrower borders of your energy. It fosters a resilience that is not about brute force endurance but about ingenious adaptation. You learn the precise architecture of your own limits, and within that blueprint you design a life of value. This path often leads to a profound connection with others who share similar challenges, creating communities of understanding that are forged in shared vulnerability. The love of fate here is the quiet, daily decision to affirm life as it is, not as you desperately wish it to be. It is the courage to plant a garden in the soil you have, rather than spending all your days grieving for the field you lost. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin to ask what can still grow here. This is not surrender. It is a strategic redeployment of your spirit from a war you cannot win to a life you can still meaningfully love. This path holds a subtle but dangerous trap, a misuse that can turn a philosophy of strength into a cage of resignation. It is called spiritual bypassing, the use of spiritual ideas or practices to avoid facing legitimate pain, to sidestep necessary action, or to rationalize unacceptable circumstances. Amor Fati, misunderstood, can become its perfect vehicle. Imagine telling someone in an unhealthy situation that they must simply love their fate, that their suffering is a teacher, and that to try to change things is to resist the universe's plan. This is not wisdom, it is a betrayal of the philosophy's active heart. True Amor Fati is never an excuse for passivity or a reason to tolerate harm. It does not ask you to love the hand that strikes you. It asks you to love the strength and clarity you find to say no more and to move yourself out of reach. The love is for your own agency, for the part of your fate that you have the power to reshape. This is a critical distinction. To love your fate includes loving your capacity to take right action within it. Sometimes the most loving act toward your own destiny is to change your circumstances. If you are in a work environment that systematically undermines your worth, Amor Fati does not mean finding bliss in daily humiliation. It might mean loving the difficult but decisive fate of resigning, of choosing the short-term uncertainty of a job search over the long-term erosion of your spirit. The philosophy is a framework for engaging with reality, not for numbing yourself to it. It is meant to help you discern where your power truly lies, and then to pour your full love and energy into exercising that power. When you confuse acceptance with approval, you risk using profound ideas as a blanket to smother your own healthy instincts for justice, for growth, and for self-protection. The test is simple. Does this perspective empower you to live with more integrity and purpose? Or does it encourage you to quietly endure what you should, in fact, courageously address? Loving your fate means loving the entire process, which includes the difficult but necessary love of setting a boundary, of ending a chapter, or of walking away. It is the love of the entire journey, not a forced smile at every pitfall along the way. This brings us to a quiet tension at the heart of a driven life. We are taught to set goals, to strive, to push toward a future vision of success. Yet here is a philosophy that asks us to love our present circumstances exactly as they are. At first glance, these ideas seem to pull in opposite directions. How can you love your current reality while simultaneously striving to change it? The answer lies in a subtle but profound shift of focus, from the distant summit to the very ground beneath your feet. Amor Fati, when applied to ambition, does not diminish your drive. It transforms the nature of the journey itself. It asks you to fall in love with the process, with the daily effort, the inevitable setbacks, and the long plateaus where progress feels invisible. This is not about lowering your standards or settling for less. It is about changing your relationship to the work required to reach them. Think of an athlete training for a competition. If their entire sense of worth and happiness is tied to winning a gold medal, the thousands of hours of practice become a mere means to an end, a grueling purgatory to be endured. Every sore muscle, every missed repetition, is a frustrating obstacle on the road to a future payoff. But what if the athlete learned to love the training itself, to appreciate the burn of a hard workout as the feeling of their body growing stronger, to see a failed attempt not as proof of inadequacy but as crucial data for improvement? In this mindset, the process is no longer a prison sentence counting down to the day of the race. It becomes the actual point, the daily practice of excellence. The competition is simply a celebration of that ongoing practice. This shift makes you remarkably resilient. When you love the struggle, failure loses its power to demoralize you. A rejected proposal, a missed promotion, a project that falls short, these are not catastrophic endings that prove your unworthiness. They become fascinating twists in the ongoing narrative of your craft, offering clear feedback on how to adjust your approach. You become less attached to a single, specific outcome and more committed to the quality of your effort. This detachment from results is not apathy, it is liberation. It frees up immense creative energy. When you are not paralyzed by the fear of a particular failure, you are more willing to take intelligent risks, to experiment, to try unconventional solutions. You become a more engaged and present participant in your own life because your sense of purpose is no longer waiting for you in some distant future. It is alive in the very next task, the very next problem to solve. The goal is still there on the horizon, a compass point giving you direction. But Amor Fati teaches you to find the treasure in the walking, to discover that the real reward was not the destination you imagined, but the person you became on the way there. Regret is a quiet ghost that haunts the back rooms of your memory. It points to the choices you wish you could undo, the words you should not have said, the path not taken that now seems bathed in perfect light. This is perhaps the most personal and stubborn resistance to loving our fate, because here, the cause of our suffering is not an external event or an illness, but our own past self. How can we possibly embrace a fate that includes our own foolishness, our own betrayal of our values, our own moments of cowardice or cruelty? The answer lies in a profound reframing of what those chapters represent. Your past mistakes are not stains on your record to be hidden or erased. They are the essential, non-negotiable curriculum of your life. Think of the most painful lesson you ever learned, the one that changed how you move through the world. It is almost certain that lesson was not delivered by a gentle teacher with a soft voice. It was delivered by the consequences of your own action or inaction. That embarrassing failure taught you humility. That betrayal of trust taught you the sacred weight of integrity. That moment of cowardice taught you the exact shape and feel of the courage you needed to cultivate. The wisdom you carry today was purchased at a high price, paid by the person you once were. To reject that past is to reject the very tuition that bought your present understanding. The practice here is not to love the mistake itself, but to feel a deep, sober gratitude for the wisdom it forged. It is to look at that younger version of yourself, not with contempt, but with a kind of compassion for the ignorance they had to live through in order for you to know better. This is how you integrate the shadow. You stop trying to cut those chapters out of your story, and instead you acknowledge their necessary role. They are the dark contrast that makes your later choices toward light so deliberate and meaningful. Your current character, with all its strengths and its hard-earned caution, is literally sculpted by those past errors. Without them, you would be a more naive, a more fragile version of yourself. To love your fate is to love the entire, unedited biography that produced the person you are in this moment, capable of this very reflection. It means closing the ledger on self-punishment and opening a different book, one where every past misstep is recorded not as a verdict, but as a vital footnote in the ongoing manuscript of your growth. Regret's ghost fades when you make peace with your own curriculum, but another specter often takes its place, one that thrives in the modern world of curated highlight reels. This is the corrosive force of envy, the quiet agony of comparing your behind-the-scenes struggle to someone else's polished final act. Here, Amor Fati reveals itself as a powerful antidote, not by attacking envy directly, but by making it irrelevant. When you are genuinely, actively engaged in loving your own unique path, with all its specific bumps and detours, you simply have no emotional bandwidth left to covet another's journey. Envy is a hunger that can never be satisfied because it is always focused on a mirage, an incomplete story you have painted in the colors of perfection. The practice of loving your fate starves that hunger at its source. It asks you to turn your gaze inward, to tend to the garden you have actually been given, rather than standing at the fence, obsessing over the seemingly flawless lawn next door. Every garden has its own conditions. Yours might have rocky soil, a stubborn patch of weeds, or a tree that casts more shade than you would like. These are your specific hardships, your unique constraints. The neighbor's lawn looks lush and green from a distance, but you cannot see the intricate network of pests they battle, the constant watering it demands, or the chemical treatments that keep it uniform. To love your fate is to kneel down in your own plot of land and begin the work of understanding it. You learn what actually grows well in your soil. You discover that those weeds might be wildflowers to a different eye, and that the shade provides a cool retreat on a hot day. Your contentment grows not from having the best garden by some external standard, but from the intimate knowledge and care you develop for your own. This is the shift from comparison to creation. You stop asking, "Why is my life not like theirs?" and start asking, "What beautiful, unexpected thing can I cultivate here with exactly what I have?" This does not mean you stop admiring other gardens or learning from other gardeners. It means your admiration is free from the bitter aftertaste of lack. You can appreciate their roses without resenting your own sunflowers. Your sense of worth becomes internally generated, rooted in the daily act of tending to your own story. When a challenge arises, you are not immediately looking sideways to see if others have it easier. You are looking at the challenge as part of your garden's unique weather, a condition to work with, not a reason to abandon your plot. The deep contentment that follows is not a passive state of having everything you want. It is the active, satisfying peace of wanting what you have, of loving the very act of cultivation itself, weeds and all. Your own garden is part of a much larger landscape. The philosophy we have explored within the quiet of our own minds now faces its most urgent and necessary test, out in the shared world we all inhabit. What does it mean to love our fate when that fate includes collective hardship, when the suffering is not personal but woven into the fabric of our communities, our history, and our planet? This is the collective dimension of Amor Fati, and it asks us to shift from a mindset of personal resilience to one of shared responsibility and radical solidarity. It begins with a difficult but crucial recognition. Our instinct when faced with large-scale problems, from historical injustices to looming environmental challenges, is often to assign blame or to sink into a passive despair. We look for a villain, a single cause to point to, or we become overwhelmed by the sheer scale, concluding that our individual actions are meaningless. Both postures, blame and despair, are forms of resistance. They are ways of refusing to accept the full reality of the situation we have collectively inherited, and in that refusal, we surrender our agency. Amor Fati, applied collectively, does not mean loving the injustice or the crisis. It means wholeheartedly loving the shared challenge itself, seeing it not as a curse, but as the definitive call to our generation's courage, ingenuity, and unity. It reframes the problem from a historical mistake we are doomed to repeat into the essential material from which we must build a better future. Think of a community facing a long-term environmental change, like a prolonged drought. The collective story can be one of lament, of anger at past policies, of waiting for a savior, or it can become a story of shared fate. This is our water, this is our soil, this is our new reality. That shift in narrative from victimhood to ownership is the first step of collective Amor Fati. It unlocks a different kind of energy, one focused on practical adaptation, on shared conservation efforts, on innovating new ways to live within the limits of their landscape. The hardship becomes the very thing that binds the community together in a common, purposeful project. They are not loving the drought, they are loving the resilient, interdependent community the drought forces them to become. This principle scales to the largest challenges we face. A global health crisis, for instance, is a terrifying shared fate. The loving response is not to pretend it is not serious or to wish it away. It is to see it as a stark, undeniable reminder of our profound interconnectedness. That recognition can fuel a wave of scientific collaboration, mutual aid, and a renewed appreciation for the systems of care that hold society together. The crisis becomes the catalyst for discovering a deeper capacity for collective care we did not know we possessed. To love our shared fate is to commit to the arduous, often frustrating, but ultimately sacred work of building bridges where there were walls, of crafting solutions where there seemed only dead ends, and of finding common purpose in the face of a common challenge. It transforms the weight of the world from a burden that crushes us into a foundation we are all responsible for strengthening together. A blank canvas or a silent page holds no judgment, only possibility. This is where the private alchemy of suffering transforms into public connection, where the raw material of a difficult life is refined into something that can touch millions. For the artist, the writer, the musician, their personal turmoil is rarely just something to be survived. It becomes the very pigment, the essential vocabulary, the haunting melody they must use. This is Amor Fati in its most visible, generative form, the act of taking the wreckage of a personal storm and building from it a shelter where others can recognize their own weather. The creative process becomes a sacred dialogue with fate, a way of saying, I will not waste this pain. I will study it, shape it, and offer it back as a map. Consider the blues musician whose songs of heartbreak and hardship are not cries of despair, but powerful, rhythmic affirmations of having lived through it. By singing the ache, they give it a form outside themselves, and in doing so, they lessen its hold. The pain is no longer a silent prisoner within. It becomes a shared story, a resonant note that allows a listener to feel less alone in their own struggle. The artist does not love the heartbreak itself, but they learn to love its potential, its strange fertility. They love the depth of feeling it provides, the contrast that makes joy more vivid, and the urgent, human truth it demands they express. A writer who channels the confusion of a lost era into a novel is practicing a profound love of fate. They are not celebrating the confusion, but they are trusting that within that specific chaos lies a universal key, a truth about resilience or hope that can only be unearthed by someone who has breathed that particular dust. Their creative work becomes an act of meaning-making, a deliberate search for the hidden pattern in the seemingly random blows of experience. This transforms the artist's relationship with their own past. A childhood marked by loneliness is no longer just a source of private sorrow for a filmmaker. It becomes the wellspring for characters who embody the quiet search for belonging, crafting stories that resonate with anyone who has ever felt on the outside. The hardship is integrated not as a secret shame, but as the foundational ore from which their unique vision is smelted. The love is directed at the act of creation itself, at the power to alchemize leaden experience into golden insight. This is why we are so drawn to art born of struggle. We sense the authenticity, the earned wisdom in the brushstroke or the lyric. It carries the weight of real life. When we listen to a symphony composed in a time of great personal loss, we are not just hearing notes, we are witnessing a soul choosing to build a cathedral of sound from the stones of its own grief. The creative act, in this light, is the ultimate affirmation. It is the defiant, beautiful proof that even our deepest wounds can become not just scars but sources of light. Yet this embrace has its boundaries, and to ignore them is to risk turning profound wisdom into a hollow platitude. There are chapters in human experience where the very language of love feels not just difficult but disrespectful, a violation of the raw truth of the event. We must speak honestly about the terrain where this philosophy meets its limit. Consider the survivor of a profound atrocity, or an individual carrying the weight of a trauma that reshaped their entire being. To suggest they should love that specific moment of violation is to misunderstand the concept entirely, and to add a second burden of spiritual expectation on top of an already staggering load. Amor Fati, in its truest sense, is not a command to feel a specific positive emotion about every single event. It is not about manufacturing gratitude for the unthinkable. The core of the practice is not a forced emotional state, but the movement, however slow and arduous, toward meaning. And sometimes the most meaningful step one can take is not a leap into love, but a single, exhausted shuffle away from hatred. For many, the most realistic and heroic application of this idea is not a full embrace, but a gradual thawing of the heart. It is the shift from active bitterness to a weary neutrality. It is the monumental victory of moving from utter denial of a painful truth to a simple, quiet acknowledgement that yes, this did happen. This progression itself is a form of amor fati, because it represents a conscious choice to engage with reality on terms that allow for survival and eventually for a fragile peace. The love in these cases is not directed at the trauma. It is directed at the survivor's own courageous, ongoing choice to breathe, to seek help, to build a life around the wound even if the wound itself never fully closes. It is the love for their own tenacity, for the self-compassion they learn to extend in the aftermath. This is where the philosophy shows its deepest flexibility. It meets you where you are. If you cannot love the storm, can you begin by simply noticing that you are still standing in the rain? If you cannot love the memory, can you learn to love the person you had to become to carry it? The goal is not to perform a spiritual bypass, papering over agony with pretty words. The goal is integration, the slow, patient work of weaving even the darkest threads into the tapestry of your life without letting them define the entire pattern. This acknowledgement of the limit is not a failure of the idea, it is its necessary grounding in human reality. It protects the concept from becoming a tyrannical ideal, and instead returns it to its proper place, a gentle companion for the long walk toward healing, not a judge demanding an unrealistic smile. This ancient call to love our fate finds a powerful echo in the most modern of fields, clinical psychology. It is not merely a poetic ideal, but a principle with a robust scientific parallel, one that forms the backbone of a widely respected therapeutic approach known as acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT. The core goal of ACT is to build psychological flexibility, which is the ability to be present with difficult thoughts and feelings without being ruled by them, and to take action guided by your deepest values, even when life is painful. This is in essence a clinical roadmap for practicing Amor Fati. Where the Stoics spoke of loving fate, ACT provides the cognitive tools to do it. One of its central pillars is acceptance, not as resignation, but as the active choice to make room for discomfort. A therapist might guide someone struggling with anxiety not to fight the racing thoughts, but to observe them with curiosity, to say, "I am having the thought that I am going to fail." This creates a critical space between the person and the thought, allowing them to see it as a passing weather pattern in the mind, not the permanent truth of the sky. This mirrors the Stoic practice of distinguishing between what is within our control and what is not, learning to accept the internal weather so we can still choose our direction. The commitment part of ACT is where Amor Fati becomes active. It asks, what do you want your life to stand for, even with this pain present? If your value is being a caring partner, but social anxiety makes gatherings difficult, psychological flexibility means acknowledging the anxiety while still choosing to attend the important family dinner, not because the fear is gone, but because connection matters more. You are loving your fate by loving the value-driven action you can take within it. This therapeutic model is supported by a growing body of research on resilience and post-traumatic growth, which we touched on earlier. Studies consistently show that individuals who can accept difficult experiences, find meaning in them, and re-engage with life according to their values are not just surviving, they are often thriving in new and profound ways. Their hardship becomes integrated into a stronger, more purposeful sense of self. This empirical work gives a new language to an ancient truth that our suffering need not be a life sentence. It can be, as both philosophy and science now suggest, the very ground from which a more resilient and meaningful life is built. The love is not for the wound, but for the person you become while healing it, a person whose actions are finally aligned with what they hold most dear. The distance between understanding a philosophy and living it is bridged by daily practice. A concept as profound as Amor Fati cannot thrive on inspiration alone. It requires a ritual, a simple, repeatable action that trains your mind to default toward this perspective. The goal is to transform a conscious effort into an unconscious reflex, a new way of seeing that becomes as natural as breathing. One of the most powerful rituals you can adopt is a nightly review, a quiet conversation with your day just before sleep. Instead of replaying your frustrations, you engage in a deliberate act of reframing. The process is straightforward. First, recall one specific difficulty you faced today, something that triggered a flare of resistance, whether it was a work setback, a personal friction, or an internal struggle. Name it plainly, then ask yourself two questions in sequence. What did this obstacle demand of me that I can respect? Perhaps it demanded patience you did not know you had, or clarity in setting a boundary, or simply the courage to sit with an uncomfortable feeling without fleeing from it. And second, how might this difficulty, in some hidden way, be serving my growth? This is not about inventing silver linings, but about searching for the genuine, often subtle, ways a challenge redirects your energy, sharpens your focus, or deepens your empathy. This 5-minute practice done consistently rewires your brain's narrative engine. You are teaching it to scan for utility and meaning, not just for threat and loss. To deepen this practice, consider keeping a separate notebook, a gratitude for obstacles journal. This is not your standard gratitude list for the good things. It is a dedicated space for honoring the rough texture of your life. Once a week, write down a single past hardship that you have come to appreciate for what it taught you or how it shaped you. Be specific. Do not write, "I am grateful for my career struggles." Write instead, "I am grateful for the specific project that failed 3 years ago because its collapse forced me to develop a skill set I now use every day, and it led me to a team that feels like home." The act of writing crystallizes the reframe. It moves the story from a vague memory in your mind to a concrete testimony on the page. Over time, this journal becomes a tangible record of your resilience, a personal anthology of your growth written in the ink of your former struggles. When a new difficulty arises, you can look back through these pages and remember, you have done this before. You have taken bitter experiences and with time and perspective, found the nourishment hidden within them. This ritual of reflection and recording builds a muscle memory of the mind. The initial sting of a setback will always be there, that is human, but with this practice, what follows the sting changes. Instead of a spiral of complaint, you will feel the beginnings of a different instinct, a quiet curiosity. You will find yourself almost automatically asking, "What is this here to teach me?" And in that question, you are no longer a victim of your fate. You are its most attentive student, learning to love the curriculum, one difficult lesson at a time. That nightly practice of gratitude for obstacles leads you to a quiet but profound realization. This entire philosophy rests upon a foundation that modern life often trains us to reject: the deep and abiding virtue of humility. To genuinely love your fate, you must first surrender a cherished illusion, the belief that the universe owes you a smooth and comfortable journey. Amor Fati is at its core a humble agreement with reality. It is the acceptance that you are not the main character in a story written for your personal satisfaction, but a single thread in a vast, complex, and often indifferent tapestry of events. This can sound harsh at first, as if it is asking you to diminish your own importance, but the opposite is true. True humility, in this sense, is not about thinking less of yourself, it is about thinking of yourself less often. It is the liberation that comes from finally putting down the exhausting burden of constantly judging whether life is being fair to you. Consider how much mental energy is spent resenting minor inconveniences, railing against traffic, or feeling personally targeted by a change in the weather. Each of these moments contains a hidden assumption that the world should arrange itself for your convenience. When you practice loving your fate, you gently dismantle that assumption. You look at the rain and instead of thinking, "This is ruining my day," you think, "This is simply the weather." The event is the same, but your relationship to it has shifted from one of personal offense to one of neutral observation. This humility is the gateway to a tremendous strength because it allows you to direct your energy toward what you can actually influence, your own response, rather than wasting it on a futile protest against circumstances you cannot change. It makes you a realist. You stop seeing obstacles as cosmic errors or personal insults, and you start seeing them as the inherent texture of existence, the friction that allows you to move forward. A humble heart, one that has made peace with not being the center of everything, becomes incredibly resilient. It is no longer shattered by every setback because it never expected a life free of setbacks. This is the quiet power at the heart of the philosophy, the strength that flows not from controlling your world, but from understanding your true, humble, and beautifully participatory place within it. That humble agreement with reality shatters a single, persistent question that echoes in our darkest moments. Why me? It is a natural cry of the heart, a search for meaning in the chaos of pain. Yet this question, while understandable, is often a trap. It assumes suffering is a deviation from a plan, a personal error in an otherwise fair system. Amor Fati gently proposes we set down this unanswerable burden and pick up a different, far more useful set of inquiries. What now, and how can I use this? This is the pivotal shift from a narrative of victimhood to a posture of agency. The why me question looks backward, demanding an explanation for a past event you cannot change. It keeps you rooted in the role of the one to whom something was done. The what now question turns you toward the present and the immediate future, the only terrain where you have any influence at all. It acknowledges the new landscape created by the hardship and asks for your first step forward within it. The how can I use this question is the active engine of Amor Fati. It treats the difficulty not as a random punishment but as raw material. It is the creative challenge of a sculptor looking at a rough, unyielding block of stone and asking, what form wants to emerge from this? Consider someone facing a sudden, serious health diagnosis. The why me spiral is a vortex of fear and injustice, searching for a cause in genetics, lifestyle, or luck that may never provide a satisfying answer. It consumes energy but yields no forward motion. Shifting to what now changes everything. It means sitting with the new reality and asking practical, empowering questions. What do I need to learn about this condition? What support systems can I build? How do I want to approach my treatment and my daily life with this new awareness? The how can I use this question might lead them to connect with others facing similar challenges, to advocate for better care, or to discover a profound patience and appreciation for small moments of wellness they had previously overlooked. Their energy moves from fighting an immutable fact to engaging with the life that is still, unquestionably, theirs to live. This does not mean the diagnosis is good or wanted. It means the person chooses to focus their love and effort on the response, on the character they build in the crucible of the experience. The why me narrative is a prison of endless, circular reasoning. The what now and how can I use this questions are the keys that unlock the door, not to escape the circumstance, but to walk freely within its walls, discovering purpose in the very place you thought you had lost it all. This shift in questioning opens the door to a final, breathtaking dimension of the idea. Friedrich Nietzsche offered a powerful metaphor for this entire practice, urging us to give style to one's character. Imagine your life not as a series of random events to be judged as good or bad, but as a single, unfolding work of art. A great novel is not great because every chapter is happy. Its power comes from the full spectrum of human experience it portrays, the moments of loss that make the triumphs meaningful, the flaws in a character that make their growth resonate. A sculpture gains its depth from the interplay of light and shadow, from the grooves and textures carved by the artist's hand. Your life, in this view, is your masterpiece. The periods of suffering, the mistakes, the times of waiting in the dark, these are not errors in the composition. They are the essential contrasts that give the brighter passages their brilliance and emotional weight. To love your fate is to adopt the mindset of that artist standing before their own creation. The artist does not love the moment of frustration when a line is wrong or a color muddies. They love the entire, dedicated process of bringing a vision into being, which necessarily includes the difficult revisions, the moments of doubt, and the patient sanding away of rough edges. They understand that the struggle is not separate from the art, it is the very act of making it. When you see your life this way, your relationship with past hardship transforms. That difficult year becomes the pivotal plot twist in your novel, the event that forced your character to evolve in ways a comfortable chapter never could. That personal failure becomes the textured shadow in your portrait, adding a gravity and authenticity that a perfectly smooth surface could never possess. You begin to ask a different kind of question about your experiences, Not, was this good or bad, but how does this contribute to the overall composition of who I am becoming? This aesthetic perspective does not erase pain, but it frames it within a larger story of meaning. It invites you to become the conscious author of your character, deliberately integrating every experience, especially the painful ones, into a coherent and beautiful whole. You are no longer a passive recipient of a random fate, but an active artist, learning to love even the most challenging strokes of the brush, because you trust they are necessary to complete the picture. That artistic perspective on your life requires one final, essential ingredient to feel complete. A masterpiece is defined not just by its content, but by its borders, by the finite space on the canvas or the final page of the book. This is where Amor Fati finds its most powerful and poignant partner in the ancient Stoic exercise of Memento Mori, the remembrance that you must one day pass from this life. At first glance, these two ideas might seem to pull in opposite directions, one a love of life and the other a constant meditation on its end. But in truth, they are inseparable. You cannot genuinely love your fate unless you fully accept its defining condition, its absolute finitude. The awareness of an ending is what gives the story its weight and its beauty. Think of a favorite book or film, one you have returned to again and again. Part of its power lies in knowing that the narrative arc will conclude, that the characters' journeys have a final destination. If the story went on forever, meandering without purpose or end, your engagement with it would weaken. The finitude focuses your attention and deepens your emotional investment in every scene. Your own life is no different. The practice of Memento Mori is not a morbid obsession with the end. It is the gentle, daily reminder that this story, your story, is a limited edition. This awareness does not diminish your experiences, it consecrates them. It makes every single moment, especially the painful and difficult ones, irreplaceable threads in a tapestry that will one day be complete. When you remember that your time is not infinite, a subtle but profound shift occurs in how you relate to hardship. That challenge you are facing, that period of struggle you wish would simply vanish, is no longer just an obstacle. It becomes a necessary, integral chapter in the only edition of your life that will ever exist. To wish it away is to wish for a different book altogether. Amor Fati, then, is the love of this specific, bounded, and utterly unique narrative. It asks, if you knew this was the only story you would ever tell, would you not want to include all of it, the valleys as well as the peaks, knowing that the contrast is what gives the journey its meaning and its depth? The shadow of the end makes the light of your present, however complicated, precious beyond measure. This union of ideas creates a quiet urgency, a poignancy that transforms daily practice from a philosophical exercise into a vital act of living. It means looking at a moment of frustration or sadness and, instead of resisting it, recognizing it as part of the authentic texture of a life that is, by its very nature, fleeting and sacred. To love your fate is to love the entire, beautiful, and heartbreakingly short song of your existence, note by note, even the dissonant ones, because you know the music will not play forever. The most intimate classroom for this philosophy is not found in solitude, but in the presence of another person. Every meaningful relationship in your life, from a lifelong partnership to a challenging family bond, offers a relentless curriculum in Amor Fati. Here, the fate you are asked to love is not an abstract event, but a living, breathing human being who reflects back to you your own edges, your own unresolved wounds, and your own capacity for growth. To love your fate in this context means to love the difficult person, or the difficult dynamic, as your most persistent and necessary teacher. That colleague whose communication style grates on you, the family member whose views feel diametrically opposed to your own, the partner whose habits trigger a deep frustration. These are not errors in your social universe. They are precisely calibrated invitations to develop virtues you might otherwise neglect. The friction they create is not a sign that something is broken, but evidence that a polishing is underway. A smooth stone becomes beautiful not by being left alone, but by being tumbled for a long time against other stones, each abrasion slowly revealing a deeper luster underneath. Your character is polished in much the same way. The person who challenges your patience is giving you endless reps in the gym of tolerance. The one who misunderstands you is training you in the art of clear, compassionate communication. The relationship that feels stuck is asking you to practice creativity in connection, to find a new key for a lock that has rusted shut. This reframe transforms relational suffering from a problem to be solved into a curriculum to be mastered. You stop asking, "How can I change this person or escape this situation?" And you start asking, "What is this friction here to teach me about myself?" Perhaps it is teaching you where your boundaries truly are, or where your pride is getting in the way of listening, or where an old hurt is being triggered by a new face. The conflict itself becomes the lesson plan. A disagreement over household chores is no longer just about who does the dishes. It becomes a laboratory for practicing negotiation without resentment, for expressing needs without blame, for receiving criticism without defensiveness. When you approach it with this mindset, even a tense conversation can become an act of love for the stronger, more understanding, more resilient partnership you are both actively forging through the very heat of the disagreement. This does not mean tolerating disrespect or abuse, which would be a corruption of the idea. It means that within the bounds of a fundamentally respectful connection, the inevitable difficulties are not threats to the relationship. They are its building materials. You learn to love the process of building, hammer swing by patient hammer swing, even when the sound is loud and the work is hard. The goal shifts from finding a perfect, conflict-free connection to co-authoring a beautiful, complex story, where every challenge overcome together becomes a paragraph you both look back on with a shared, earned pride. Even the most dedicated artist has days when the brush feels clumsy in their hand. The commitment to love your fate is not a destination you reach and then inhabit forever. It is a path you walk, and like any path, it has stretches where you stumble, where you lose sight of the horizon, and fall back into the familiar ruts of resentment or self-pity. This is not a failure of your character. It is a necessary part of the practice itself. Your mind, with its ancient wiring for threat and complaint, will sometimes reclaim its old territory. A week of small frustrations piles up, and you find yourself snapping at a loved one, or lying awake at night cataloging every injustice of the day. In those moments, the idea of Amor Fati can feel like a distant theory, a beautiful concept that shatters against the hard surface of a bad mood. The first step in navigating this backsliding is to meet it with compassion, not criticism, to notice the old patterns returning and to simply say, "Ah, there it is again. This is the weather of my mind today." This gentle acknowledgement is itself a powerful act of Amor Fati, a loving acceptance of your own imperfection in practicing acceptance. You are not betraying the philosophy by feeling anger. You are being presented with a new, immediate opportunity to apply it, this time to your own perceived failure. Instead of layering shame on top of frustration, you can pause and offer yourself the same understanding you are learning to extend to external events. A quiet self-reminder can be enough to reset your course. You might say to yourself, "This resistance is part of the material," or "I am having the thought that this is unfair and I can choose a different story." These are not magic spells, but cognitive tools that create a sliver of space between the feeling and your identification with it. Another powerful strategy is to look backward with kindness. When you are mired in present difficulty, deliberately recall a past hardship that you have since integrated, one where the reframe eventually became clear. Remember the job you lost that led you to a more fulfilling career, or the relationship that ended, creating the space for a deeper connection to later enter your life. Revisiting these lived examples is like consulting your own personal guidebook. It provides tangible evidence that your current struggle, too, holds a seed of future understanding, even if you cannot see it yet. This perspective transforms backsliding from a demoralizing setback into a valuable part of the rhythm. Just as a musician practices scales daily, not because they have mastered them, but to maintain the skill, your moments of doubt are the necessary repetitions that deepen your resilience. They keep the philosophy human, grounded, and sustainable, a companion for the entire journey, not just for the days when the sun is shining. This entire exploration circles back to a single, quiet truth. Amor Fati is the ultimate act of sovereignty over your own inner world. It is the deliberate choice to reclaim authorship of the story you tell about your life, especially when the plot takes a difficult turn. We have seen it is not a denial of pain, nor a spiritual bypass that asks you to smile through hardship. It is a profound and practical method of alchemy. It is the patient, daily work of taking the raw, heavy metal of your suffering and transmuting it into something of lasting value, into power, into meaning, and into a deeper, more authentic love for the breathtaking totality of your own existence. The freedom it offers is not freedom from difficulty. It is the freedom found in finally ceasing to fight the reality of what is already true. When you stop arguing with the weather, you can finally feel the sun on your skin, even on a cloudy day. The energy once spent on resentment and regret is now available for creation, for connection, for the simple, profound act of living with your eyes wide open. So where does this leave you right now in the middle of your own story? The practice begins not with a grand tragedy, but with a single, small friction. Look at your life as it stands today. Identify one minor difficulty, a persistent irritation, a small worry, or a manageable frustration you are currently facing. This is your starting material. Your invitation is to take that one thing and just for today apply the gentle lens of Amor Fati. Acknowledge its presence without judgment. See it as your fate in this moment. Then actively look for the hidden edge within it, the chance to practice a forgotten virtue, the unexpected space it creates, or the subtle lesson it carries. This is how you begin to rewrite the narrative, not in the past but in the living present. This is how you start to love your fate, one conscious, courageous breath at a time.